The movie begins with a pregnant woman named Kate and her husband John going to the delivery room. Kate is very close to giving birth and she is being wheeled in. She leaves a bloody trail behind her. In the delivery room she screams as she delivers her baby. To her horror she is informed that the baby has died. Kate is devastated and the nurses hand her the baby while she cries and screams out in shock. Suddenly, Kate wakes up and realizes it was a dream. Kate is on medication and the next day, we see her going to see her therapist where we learn Kate has recently suffered a stillbirth. Kate also reveals that she and John have been talking about adopting a child, but is unsure if she is ready yet, as she has been struggling with staying sober. Dr. Browning reassures her that she has nothing to worry about. Later we see Kate picking up her deaf daughter Max from school. While driving she seems distracted and slams on the brakes, just avoiding a serious accident with a truck. Kate arrives home where we are introduced to her son Daniel. That night, after some reassurance from John, the couple decide to adopt a child to try and fill the void left in their life from the loss of their daughter Jessica. The next morning, the couple decide to go to St. Mariana's orphanage. They are greeted by Sister Abigail who helps them look around. After coming back from the bathroom, John hears a young girl singing. Following the sound, he finds a girl named Esther and is immediately drawn to her. She displays excellent knowledge and artistry, which the couple like very much. They decide to adopt her and after a consultation with Sister Abigail, they learn that Esther is originally from Russia but came to America after her family died in a house fire. Abigail also informs them that they never had any problems with her and she is a princess. Hearing this, the couple decide to adopt little Esther. After a couple of days, they bring Esther back to their home to meet the rest of the family. Max and her grandma, John's mother Barbara, take an immediate liking to her. Daniel, however, is unsure of her and when he sees her receiving welcoming gifts and getting more attention than him, he becomes jealous. Later we see Esther playing with Max in the snow while Daniel goes to the treehouse with his friends. Barbara and Kate talk about an incident that happened with Max at the lake when Kate was drinking heavily. That night while Max is asleep in her room, we see Esther standing over her and staring at her strangely. While Kate and John are making love in the bedroom, they are disturbed by Esther who has woken up Max and brought her with her. She asks if they can sleep in their bed as they are afraid of the loud thunder outside. The girls quickly join them in bed and Esther snuggles up next to John. The next day, while they are all getting ready for school, Esther comes down in an old-fashioned dress. Max and Daniel chuckle upon seeing it. Kate suggests that she wears something else but Esther tells her that there is nothing wrong with being different. At the school, Esther begins to get bullied by a girl named Brenda who laughs at her appearance. Later that day, the children play on the frozen lake which angers Kate. Max and Esther go to the woods to find Daniel, who is practicing shooting with his paintball gun. He shoots a bird and begins feeling remorseful as it lies on the floor in pain. Esther tells him to put the bird out of its misery but he is unable to do so. We then see Esther picking up a rock and killing the bird like it was nothing. Later that night, while Kate is putting things away, she finds Esther's Bible which she has hidden. When she opens it, she finds a picture of a man. At school, Esther continues to be mistreated and one day Daniel pushes her over in the corridor. As she goes to pick up her things, Brenda knocks the Bible out of her hand sending it flying into the air. Esther scrambles to pick up the pages but is pulled backwards from her collar by Brenda which makes Esther enraged. Later that night, Kate tries to talk to Esther about what happened at school and cheer her up. Kate shows her their family scrapbook where she added Esther's picture. Esther is curious about who Jessica is. Kate takes her to the garden full of white roses. She tells her that she believes that as long as there are roses in the garden, a part of Jessica lives on. That night, Brenda and John get intimate and make love in the kitchen when they are suddenly interrupted by Esther. The next day, Kate tries to talk to her about it. Esther tells her that she already knows what sex is and mentions the F word which shocks Kate. We see her discussing it later with John and suggests taking her to see Dr. Browning. John thinks it is fine and there is no reason to overreact. The next day while at the playground, Esther, Max, and John are approached by their neighbor Joyce who starts flirting with John. Esther listens in on the conversation but is distracted by the arrival of Brenda. When Brenda is at the top of the slide, Esther quickly approaches her from behind and pushes her off, breaking her leg while Max watches on. Later that evening, John and Kate try to talk to Esther about the incident, but she denies it and surprisingly, Max backs her up saying she slipped. As they begin to pray, Daniel is seen getting angry and begins to curse at Esther. He leaves the table in anger and later that night, John locks up the treehouse as punishment. The next day, to Kate's surprise, she finds Esther playing the piano exceptionally well. She finds this strange as Esther told her she didn't know how to play. Later that evening, she talks to John about it but he doesn't think too much of it. Things become heated and they get into an argument. Kate tells him that Esther told him that he was flirting with the neighbor at the park. We then learn that John cheated on Kate 10 years ago, which has given her trust issues. Max brings up how Kate's drinking problem has put Max's life in danger in the past. The camera pans to Esther showing her smiling to herself after hearing them argue. The next day, Sister Abigail arrives at their house to talk about Esther. She informs Kate and John that she recalls an incident at her old school, where a boy fell and was stabbed with a pair of scissors, and Esther's previous family died in a house fire. This concerns Kate but again John dismisses it. They decide to take her to see Dr. Browning but unaware to them, Esther has been listening to their every word. We then see Esther rushing to innocent little Max and convinces her to help. They find the keys to the treehouse and safe where they find a gun. They quickly make their way to the bridge to make sure Sister Abigail doesn't come back. As she approaches in her car, Esther pushes Max into the middle of the road causing Sister Abigail to swerve and crash. The disorientated Abigail makes her way out of the car to help Max who is crying in the road. Suddenly, Esther comes from behind and lashes out at her with a hammer. She asks Max to help and they push her body down the hill. Somehow, Abigail is still alive and when she looks up, Esther brutally finishes her off. They both return to the treehouse and hide the hammer in their bloodied clothes. Max is petrified but Esther tells her not to worry and hugs her. We then see them leaving the treehouse but are seen by Daniel. That night, Esther comes to his room and puts a knife to his throat and threatens him to not tell anyone. The next day, Kate gets a call from the orphanage saying that Sister Abigail hasn't returned, which she finds strange. Later, the police find Abigail's dead body, which horrifies her and she begins to think there is something strange going on. She decides to take matters into her own hands and starts looking into Esther's past. She contacts the orphanage she came from and is surprised there are no records of her ever being there. When Jane talks to John about it, he thinks that she is overreacting again and they begin arguing. While dropping the children to school, Kate asks them about Esther and if there is anything she should know about. Both children are scared of her and lie to Kate. Later that day, Esther tells John that she thinks Kate does not like her. He suggests that she give her something to show her how much she appreciates her. That evening, Esther gives Kate some white flowers. Kate is horrified when she sees that the flowers are from her daughter's grave and becomes enraged. She grabs her and they both get into a struggle. John quickly arrives and breaks things up and tells Kate that it was his fault. That evening, Esther goes to the garage and breaks her own arm. When she tells John about it, he is shocked and takes her to the hospital. When Kate arrives back home, he confronts her about it but she tells him she didn't grab Esther that hard. Later that evening, we see Kate going to the store and buying some wine as she is really stressed out. She has a little but decides to throw the rest of it down the sink. The next morning Kate takes the children to school and when Daniel walks off, he drops some of his books. When Kate goes out of the car to pick them up, Esther takes off the handbrake and the car starts rolling backwards. The car has Max in there and Kate screams out as she chases after the car. Luckily for her, the car comes to a stop when it hits a pile of snow. That evening Dr. Browning visits them at their home and they discuss what happened. John pulls out the empty bottle of wine implying that she drank a lot yesterday night. Kate denies drinking a lot but John doesn't believe her. He tells her that she has 7 days to go to rehab or he is leaving with the kids. Later that night, we see Esther threatening Max and that she will shoot his mom if she tells her anything. Daniel goes into Max's room and she finally tells him what Esther did to Sister Abigail and the stuff they hid in the tree house. Unknown to them, Esther is listening to everything outside. That night, Kate goes to check on Max and is startled when she finds Esther sitting there with her diary. She tries to provoke her by reading it out loud but this time, Kate does not fall for her tricks. The next morning, Kate is seen looking through Esther's room for her Bible. She finally sees the word Saarn Institute on there, and when she looks it up on the web, she is shocked to learn that it is actually a mental institution in Estonia. In the next scene, we see Daniel going up the tree house, and he is shocked when he sees Esther behind him. She begins pouring gasoline on the evidence and lights it up. She locks him inside and leaves him burning inside the tree house. Daniel manages to climb out of the window and tries calling out for help. As the tree house burns, he falls onto the ground. Esther smiles to herself and is just about to finish him off with a rock when suddenly, Max pushes her to the ground and Kate comes running towards them. In the next scene, they are all at the hospital where they learn that Daniel has suffered a neck injury and he may not be able to remember much. Kate tells John about what she found and they begin arguing again when he still doesn't believe her. Meanwhile, Esther makes her way to where Daniel is and tries to suffocate him. Max realizes what she is doing and tries to warn her parents. They hear the alarm go off in his room and they run frantically to him. Luckily the doctors get there in time and are able to revive him. Kate is incensed and she walks over to Esther and slaps her across her face. Esther falls to the floor and Kate is pulled away from her and is sedated by the nurses. When she finally comes around, John tells her that Daniel is going to be fine and not to worry. That evening when they get home, he tucks Max into bed, and when Esther goes to hug her as well, she takes her hearing aid. John decides to have a few drinks downstairs and gets a little drunk. While he is sitting there, Esther comes downstairs all dressed up and tries to seduce him. When he realizes what she is doing, he gets angry and tells her that he does not like her that way. He tells her that he will be calling the orphanage tomorrow and tells her to go upstairs. Esther tells John not to talk to her like a child and goes upstairs and begins crying on the bed. The scene cuts to Kate getting a phone call from Dr. Varava, a man working in the mental institute. He informs Kate that Esther was a former patient of theirs and that she is not a girl. She is actually a 33-year-old violent woman, who suffers from a disease that called dwarfism. He reveals that she has scars on her neck and wrists from when she tried to escape from a straitjacket. He tells her that she killed 7 people from the same family and is extremely dangerous. Kate can't believe what she is hearing and begins panicking. She quickly makes her way home and calls the police on the way. Back at the house, John goes up to Esther's room to apologize but is unable to find her. He finds the pictures she drew on the wall full of deranged acts. Suddenly, the power cuts out in the house and John goes looking through the house. From nowhere, Esther stabs John and he falls to the floor. She stands over him and repeatedly stabs him until she finishes him off. When Esther looks up, she sees Max looking at her and goes after her. Next, we see Kate driving as fast as she can towards the house and she crashes the car. She runs upstairs and is horrified to find John dead on the floor. She realizes that Max is in trouble and desperately tries to find her. As Kate makes her way through the house in the dark, she is shot by Esther. Luckily she is caught in the shoulder and manages to hide outside the window before she is killed. Kate sees Max hiding below in the greenhouse. When she sees Esther going towards her, she tries to distract her but falls through the glass directly on top of her. As both of them lie there unconscious, Max comes and wakes up her mother. Kate grabs the gun and Max and makes her way outside to safety. When the police arrive at the house, they find that Esther has escaped. Suddenly, we see Esther running towards Kate and Max with a knife. Kate and Esther get into a fight and they both fall down onto the frozen lake. As Esther starts attacking the injured Kate, Max somehow picks up the gun and shoots, hitting the lake. Both Kate and Esther fall into the freezing water and struggle with each other. Kate manages to push off Esther, and as she climbs out of the lake, Esther grabs Kate's leg and begs her not to let her die. Kate stares at her and with one final kick, hits her in the head, breaking her neck. In the last scene we see Esther's dead body floating down to the bottom of the lake and the movie ends there. You guys are awesome if you have made it this far in the video. If you want to see more of such movie recaps, hit the subscribe button to become part of our movie family.